sewn into a hidden pocket in a dead man's trousers, so small it had been missed for months, was a single scrap of paper. 2 words, torn from the last page of a book. Tamám Shud, Persian for, "It is finished." Nobody has ever proven what was finished. Not how he died. Not who he was. Not why a dead stranger was carrying a phone number that led straight to a woman living 400 meters from where his body was found. This case is older than the internet by decades, but nothing has kept it alive like the internet has. 70+ years later, it is still one of the most obsessed over threads in the world of unsolved mysteries. December 1st, 1948, 6:30 in the morning. A couple walking on Somerton Park Beach, near Adelaide, South Australia, found a well-dressed man lying against the seawall, legs out, feet crossed as if asleep. He wasn't asleep. Witnesses said they'd seen a man in that exact spot the evening before, lying still while mosquitoes landed on him, unmoving even as the streetlights came on. Nobody thought to check on him. There was no wallet. No identification. Every single label had been cut or torn from his clothes. His shoes were oddly, freshly polished, as if he hadn't spent the day walking a beach at all. In his pockets, an unused train ticket, a bus ticket, a comb made in America, a half-empty pack of chewing gum, and a cigarette packet holding a different, more expensive brand of cigarettes than the label on the box. Police photographed him, fingerprinted him, sent the prints to every English-speaking country on Earth. Nothing matched. His dental records matched no one. By early 1949, 8 different people had positively identified him. All 8 were wrong. With no name to bury him under, authorities embalmed the body, the first time South Australian police had ever needed to. A bookmakers association paid for a funeral so a nameless man wouldn't be buried a pauper. For 6 weeks, that was the case. An unidentified man, no cause of death, no leads. Then, on the 14th of January, staff at Adelaide's railway station opened an unclaimed suitcase in the cloakroom. Inside, a dressing gown, slippers, pajamas, a screwdriver, and a table knife filed down into a short, sharp blade. Every clothing label had been removed here too, except for 3, missed or left on purpose. They read Keane. No missing person named Keane turned up anywhere in the English-speaking world. It was, police believed, exactly what someone would leave behind if they wanted searchers to waste months chasing a name that wasn't real. The autopsy found no obvious cause of death, but the pathologist was certain it wasn't natural. The spleen was 3 times its normal size. The organs were engorged with blood. Every sign pointed to poison. No poison could be found. A pharmacology professor testified that certain rare cardiac drugs, digitalis wabayan, could kill in a dose small enough to be undetectable by 1948 forensic science. Both were, at the time, sold over the counter without question. And there was one detail no one could explain. A body poison like this should show violent convulsions, vomiting. His didn't. Investigators began to suspect he hadn't died on that beach at all, that someone had moved him there. Months after the body was found, someone finally noticed the tiny pocket sewn inside his trousers. A pocket built for it, not a factory edition. Inside that rolled scrap of paper, Tamám Shud, it is finished. Police released a photo of the scrap to the press and asked the public, "Does anyone own the book this was torn from?" Weeks later, a man walked into a station holding a copy of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. He said he'd found it tossed in the back seat of his unlocked car, parked near the beach, around the time of the death. The torn edge matched perfectly, and on the inside back cover, 5 faint lines in capital letters. A code. Military cryptographers examined it in 1978 and admitted defeat. Too short, they said, to prove anything either way. It might be a cipher. It might be shorthand. It might be the private language of a mind unraveling. To this day, no one has broken it. Not Australian intelligence in 1949. Not a television investigation in 1978. Not university researchers running statistical models against the Rubaiyat itself decades later. It simply will not resolve. But the book held one more thing, faintly written, a local telephone number. Police traced it to a young nurse living on Mosley Street in Glenelg, walking distance from where the body was found. Her name was Jessica Thompson. When police asked her about the dead man, she said she didn't know him and had no idea why he'd have her number. But she also mentioned, almost in passing, that a strange man had once come looking for her. Detectives showed her a plaster cast made from the dead man's face. Witnesses in the room said she looked like she might faint. She turned away and refused to look at it again. And then she asked to be left out of the file entirely. Police agreed to keep her name out of the record, a decision that, decades later, historians would call one of the biggest mistakes of the entire investigation. It meant no one could properly follow the one lead that seemed to matter. There was a second thread. Years earlier, in Sydney, Thompson had given an identical copy of the Rubaiyat to an army lieutenant named Alf Boxall, inscribed with her nickname, Jestin, and a verse about broken promises. For a while, police were certain Boxall was the dead man. Then, in July 1949, he turned up alive in Sydney, his own copy of the book intact, untorn, sitting on his shelf. A dead end that somehow made things stranger. For decades, the case went cold. Then, in 2013, Jessica Thompson's daughter went on national television and said something no one expected. Her mother had lied to police. She had known who the dead man was all along. She said her mother had told her the truth was known to a level higher than the police force, and that Thompson had learned Russian and expressed interest in communism. Details she never explained and took to her grave in 2007. That single interview is why this case belongs to the internet age as much as 1948. Cold War tensions. A secret code. A woman who lied to police and never explained why. 2 military test sites nearby, built for secrets. The man's death came just as Australia was standing up its first intelligence agency, in direct response to Soviet spying uncovered by intercepted cable traffic. A body with an unbreakable code turning up nearby was, to some, too convenient to ignore. For decades, that's where the trail ended. A spy theory nobody could prove, a code nobody could break, and a body nobody could name. Then, in 2021, with DNA science finally advanced enough to try again, the grave was reopened. Researchers pulled hair strands preserved in the original plaster cast, made 70 years earlier by a police technician who had no idea he was safeguarding the one piece of evidence that would eventually crack the case wide open. In July 2022, using genetic genealogy, matching distant cousins on both sides of his family, researchers announced a name: Carl Charles Webb. Born 1905 in Melbourne, an electrical engineer and instrument maker. Not a spy, not a dancer, an ordinary man. His ex-wife had described him, years before anyone knew who he was, as solitary and moody, prone to violence when he lost even small arguments. In 1946, she said, he'd already tried once to end his own life with an overdose. He wrote poetry, most of it about death, which he called his greatest desire. He'd lost a brother as a prisoner of war and a nephew in the RAF, both in 1943. By 1947, his marriage had collapsed and he had vanished. Researchers now believe he may have died by his own hand, the same undetectable poison, chosen by a man who had already tried once, wrapped in the same book he'd once quietly copied verses about ruin from. But South Australia police have never officially confirmed the identification. The manner of death remains formally undetermined. Nobody has explained why a Melbourne instrument maker would end up on a beach outside Adelaide with a nurse's number hidden in his pocket. And the code, 5 lines, written in a dead man's hand, in a book about accepting that everything eventually ends, still has never been broken. Not by the military, not by cryptographers, not by 70 years of amateurs trying. A name closed one door on this case. It opened several more. Who was he really becoming in the years no one could track him? What did Jessica Thompson know? And why did she carry it to her grave rather than speak it? Today, the grave in West Terrace Cemetery still gets flowers from strangers who were never asked to explain why. The file, technically, is still open. Some mysteries don't get solved. They just get a name attached and keep going anyway. So here's the question this case has never answered. If you had 5 lines of code, written by a man who believed his life was finished, what would you assume they said? Tell me what you think down below. And if you want more cases like this one, subscribe.